I'm very excited to be here with all of you today, especially because I'm sharing stage with these two food heroes. I believe that we haven't been speaking a lot about food in this summit, but if we aim to create that sustainable future, it's a topic, a concept we should discuss in depth. So this is a great opportunity for us to do so with these food heroes. So as we mentioned, we are joined by two food entrepreneurs, food founders that are tackling some of the most essential issues of our food system. And as the topic of this panel states, we need to hack sustainable eating. But first of all, I'd like to discuss why we need to do so, why we need to reflect on what are those challenges. But before doing that, I'd love if you could also share why you came into this sphere, in this arena of working to tackle those challenges. So you can go. Yeah.
Well, I'm very excited to be here, and as you were saying, it's so important to talk about, this topic, and it's such a summit. And well, basically, I'm Ariadna, and my connection with sustainable and healthy eating actually came from, a very personal condition. So in 2018, I was diagnosed with a chronic bowel condition. So it's basically a chronic inflammation of digestive system. And in that moment, I developed quite a hard relationship with food, and I was like, okay, I want to eat healthy food, but also every food is different. So we'll talk later about personalization and how could I make that sustainable. So that's how I got into nutrition science, and for me that was like a big wow moment. And then as a result in this journey, I created Sano, which is a digital platform. It's a data platform. We compile data sets for basically not only diet pattern, we actually also look a lot into gut and microbiome. So I can't wait to talk a bit more about, also plant-based and benefits of microbiome. Correlated with symptoms, biomarkers, and in the end of the day, we do a lot of work also for, healthy eating and helping not only patients, but actually consumers around the world on how to develop a good relationship with food for their own health.
And actually, gut health and knowing more about gut health is one of the big promises for our longevity, our health, our future well-being, right? So I read you're an award-winning founder related to your gut initiative. Last year you won the Johnson & Johnson Award. So congratulations, and I'm eager to hear more about personalized nutrition and how we can really tap into what each one of us needs. Maybe, Moody, why did you get into this very exciting and complicated world?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with both of you. So I'm Moody Solomon. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Ripe Labs. And our mission at Ripe Labs is quite simple, ambitious but simple, and it's to put an end to food waste. And how I got into this, I'm actually an engineer by training. I started my career in medical devices, and then eventually went over to biotech. And so I spent the first half of my career really working on high-tech innovation products that saved people's lives. And when we looked at the problem of food waste, I first got introduced to it about 7 years ago. I was really floored by the magnitude of the problem. And interestingly, despite all of the advancements we made, how little innovation was in the industry at that time, relatively speaking. And so, coming from the medical device industry where we developed products that could, impact millions of lives, or 1 in 100,000, for example, food waste was something that was impacting every single person on the face of this planet, regardless of background, economic conditions, where you are in the world. It impacts every single person. And to put it in perspective, it's always interesting to look at the statistics. So over the next 30 minutes, by the time this panel is done, we will have wasted enough food to feed over 30 million people. Right? Just the next 30 minutes, that's enough to feed over 2/3 of all of Spain. And that very same food waste ends up in landfills, releasing tens of thousands of CO2 gas. In fact, if food waste was a country, it would be the 3rd largest greenhouse gas emitter behind China and the US. So the statistics are staggering, and obviously it's a problem that's economical, social, and environmental. And so when we looked at that problem, we realized that, okay, Why is that? Well, food waste is experienced all across the supply chain, from the farm all the way down to the consumer at every single stage. So we have a very inefficient food supply chain issue, and it amounts to over $2.6 trillion in losses. So I'm throwing a lot of negative statistics here. So what are we doing about it, right? So we wanted to develop a technology that was very easy to use, simple to apply anywhere along the supply chain, and can be adopted by anyone along that supply chain, from the smallest smallholder farmer to the largest distributors and packers in the world. And so what we ended up developing at Ripe Labs was a formulation, a bioactive plant-based food-grade formulation that can be applied to a variety of surfaces, including stickers. You simply take our stickers, apply them to a fruit or a package of the fruit. They release the food-grade bioactive compounds and can extend the shelf life of fresh produce, in certain cases doubling the shelf life. To give you just a little bit more context, because a lot of people hear that and they get a little skeptical. It sounds like magic almost. And the science behind it, again, is really plant-based. So plants produce these secondary metabolites, natural compounds, to protect themselves. You could smell it at a distance. For example, a lavender plant that you have planted somewhere, you could smell the lavender that it releases. And why is it doing that? It has a variety of attributes, but one of which, the key ones, is to protect itself. And so we take those very same compounds, and we can develop that formulation that goes on the surface of stickers, and stickers is just one mode of way of applying it. And so in a nutshell, that's what we do, and this is how we're tackling the issue of food waste and sustainability.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we have mentioned, our food system is totally broken, and we are being very irresponsible and doing very absurd things, because you stated some data that is completely mind-blowing. And it's broken specifically from two angles, from the health standpoint and from the climate standpoint. So in the beginning, our food system was created with the intention of providing nutrition to people, of serving that purpose, right? And at the moment, what we see is that our food system is making people sick. If we look at the data related to health, we see that 40% of the people nowadays are suffering from obesity and diet-related diseases. We see that 800 million people don't have access to enough food. As you mentioned, almost 40% of all the food that we produce is wasted and could be used and redistributed to actually feed those people. It's also a public cost problem, so we don't have to tackle this only from an ethical point of view, but it's also costing us a lot of money. So it's not serving the initial purpose of our food system, which was to provide that nutrition to people without harming the planet and being able to do so for the following generations. So maybe Ariana can elaborate a bit more on how this food system is very absurd from a health standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we step back, right, we see, the prevalence of chronic inflammatory related, conditions is just booming. And I know in this room here, I'm sure you guys know anyone with food allergies, with some sort of digestive chronic disorders, metabolic health conditions. It's kind of all also correlated, right? And food more and more is processed, right? We live in a society where all the food is manipulated, and all that obviously translates into, we are not made for this, right? I mean, I would love to tell you a bit more about, microbiome, because it's something that we really look into in terms of, this health assessment and nutrition. But, each of you here, we have trillion of good bacteria living in our digestive tract, right? And it's kind of the second organ in itself.
Good and bad, right? Depending on what we are eating.
It's an ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
We all have like good and bad, as long, they need to be in harmony. But the key here is that these bacteria, these good bacteria, they eat from fiber that is typically found mainly in plants, right? Those the polyphenols and carbohydrates that are typically found in plant-based diets. So obviously with all the manipulation in the industry of foods, a lot of added sugars, a lot of, whole grain foods, even some of them are manipulated, all that over time has changed this microbial composition of the gut microbiome. And that's why, you mentioned some of the stats, right? We see 20% of the world population is struggling with some sort of chronic digestive intolerance. 3 out of 4 people in the world struggle and are affected by chronic inflammation.
And I would say it's also a problem in countries of the Mediterranean. So we remember the Mediterranean diet, and we believe we are still carrying on a healthy diet, but it is not so. And if we see the stats regarding child health and nutrition and obesity rates in Spain, for example, it's staggering. And we are not doing that well in Spain either, actually.
But it's very interesting. Obviously, the Mediterranean, I mean, there's a lot of research, right, around this, all the benefits of the Mediterranean diet, but still, depending on, what foods have also been processed and added in this diet, as you say, right, the stats speak by themselves that there's something quite off balance there. There's still a lot of work to be done. I hope that this helps all of us to understand, okay, this is a big fundamental problem in terms of what we eat, all the inflammatory, right, and gut irritant foods, and how this is really disrupting, health in terms of, allergies and many chronic inflammation diseases.
Mm-hmm. And actually, it's very correlated to climate health. Sometimes we visualize these two issues of the food system, climate and health, as two separate ones. But in the end, if the soil is not healthy, the food will not be as nutritious. If it's not biodiverse, it won't capture as much nitrogen. So we do have to tackle this from a 360 point of view. I would like for you to share some examples of what you are doing. You already mentioned a bit about your companies, but especially how you are trying to scale this and bring this to a larger impact and to a larger scale, as we are all very mission-driven, and what we want to do is to change the world for the better. So we might have a brilliant idea, but if we maintain it in our own community, it's not going to change the lives of people. So how do we scale up these very disruptive and revolutionary startups that can have a potential, but if they don't grow, they won't?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And so for us at Ripe Labs, what we did was you look at food waste as a whole, right? And for our technology, it can and it will be applied to all different food groups given its mode of action. But what we decided to particularly focus on to begin with, because we say this all the time and remind ourselves of that all the time as a startup, that if you try to do everything, you'll end up doing nothing. So we decided to particularly focus on fruits and vegetables, which is very relevant to this discussion about plant-based diets. And fruits and vegetables in particular have the highest wastage rates in comparison to all other food groups. So for example, in the United States, it's up to 50% of the fruits and vegetables we produce go to waste. So literally for every apple or strawberry you're eating, there's one going in the trash. And in developing countries, that could be as high as 60%. And so by focusing on high value, short shelf life produce is how we started to look at the problem and tackle that problem specifically. And that included a lot of some of the most healthiest but least accessible produce, such as berries, for example, for which we have been able to double the shelf life in certain scenarios and in certain cases. And so from that standpoint, that's kind of where we started to focus.
Mm-hmm. And it's very important to keep in mind that when we are wasting an apple, as you said, we are also wasting all the resources that went into it.
Yeah.
So 70% of all the fresh water we have available in the planet is devoted to growing food. So it's really absurd, as I said in the beginning, that we are then throwing not only those tons of fresh produce, but also that very scarce resource that is water. We're also throwing away the job of the farmers, so all the hours put into that, the transportation, so logistics. So that all sums up to more than 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions.
That's exactly.
So absolutely, food waste is one of the main challenges we should be tackling, and I believe we have to reconsider how we are trying to tackle this issue. I'd like to share with you an example that I had not thought of too much. And lately, in Spain, there has been a big controversy about the single plastic use and the limitation to this through regulatory limitations, right? So some growers in Almeria were telling me that they normally ship the cucumbers packed in plastic, so that when they arrive to Germany, let's say, they arrive in perfect conditions. And now with this law, they have to ship them without the plastic. This is great on the one side. We are not throwing plastic into landfill, but on the other, we are generating more food waste. So we really have to view this problem and all the externalities of what can happen if we put forward a law. Right?
Yeah, no, very, very well said. And you know a lot about the supply chain, which is fantastic. And you're exactly right about cucumbers, about plastic usage into the supply chain, and all the initiatives that are being put into place to minimize that use. And that's exactly why technologies like ours and others, actually, there's a lot of other different angles, as you mentioned, from a 360-degree standpoint. You have to tackle. It's such a huge problem that you have to tackle it from so many different angles to solve these exact same problems. Reducing plastic is great, but then that could contribute to larger food waste. So what's an alternative solution? And this is where innovation becomes a very exciting avenue to explore, especially in this industry.
Absolutely. So both innovation and investment to really make that better product widely available. So speaking about supply chain, I'd like to tap into how can we incentivize all the different stakeholders to make that change towards that better food from a nutrition and climate standpoint.
Yeah, and actually, one thing I would like to share is connecting a bit, the quality of the soil, the waste, and translating that to human health. I mean, we see a lot of users reporting through our platform that, for example, they were feeling a lot of, bloating and different type of, symptoms. And then some of the studies we conduct through the platform ask the user, but what do you eat and where you buy it? Right? And basically, it was so interesting to see some users saying, oh, wait a second, now I'm going to buy organic food. And then basically, they were not reporting as many symptoms as before. So one of the conclusions was that all the pesticides and basically all the different products that are added as well to preserve the product, and that fruit and vegetable was impacting them as well. But yeah, to your point about how we can make an impact also like on a large scale, right, involving different stakeholders. So what we do is gathering all this data, and we do a lot in the clinical research setting. So for example, through our platform, we can validate certain nutrition protocols. And for certain collectives of people with different symptom groups, also different geographies, right? I mean, also it's very interesting because each country has different soil, different value chains, and how all that environmental factor also has an impact. But it's all about, in the end, the data and the correlations and how we can help, users, people like all of us, also personalize that down the line, right? Whatever food works for you might not work for me or for, you, right? It's all about also different conditions, different food allergies, different inflammatory conditions. So for us, really, our vision is, we work a lot with clinicians and also researchers. I mean, at the moment, biotech is also, a type of population we work a lot with, precisely for, to power up and speed up this research with very, insightful data sets that are also very comprehensive, with 360 perspective.
Yeah, no, and it's amazing how everything is so interconnected, right, between health, between food waste, climate impact, and perhaps one of the things that is always of value to highlight and to emphasize is, again, the magnitude of this problem. It's such a big problem and we remind investors of this all the time, right? Investors are looking for the next big thing, the biggest company that's going to be out there to tackle this problem, and we remind them that there is no way that this is going to be a one solution type a one solution type application. It's going to have to be tackled from different angles. So speaking of educating the consumers and different solutions that are out there that are very interesting, in addition to extending the shelf life, we're actually seeing, and I've observed this firsthand, having started Ripe Labs about 6 years ago or almost 7 years ago now. It was really interesting because we would walk into those retailers or those distributors, huge customers, and you talk to their R&D team, which is typically who we interact with at first, and it was really interesting to see that they had 3 or 4 people in their R&D team that did everything, right? From the vision systems they're implementing into their stores to the transportation systems to the processing lines, and also sustainability and extending the shelf life of produce was just one other element that they were looking into. And fast forward a few years later, as people started to become more and more aware and sensitive to food waste, sustainability, health, today you go to those very same customers and they have a dedicated team that's just focused on exploring technologies that are going to tackle these issues, whether it's shelf life extension or healthier, more sustainable ways of producing food. So there are technologies out there today which is quite exciting, in addition to things like ours that extend the shelf life, that can connect neighbors, for example, to one another. An app literally that connects neighbors. So if you have produce that's about to go bad, you can find a neighbor that can maybe use it. There AI, of course, is playing a huge role in this. There are many very exciting startups that are coming up with innovative ways of tracking consumption, whether it's at the consumer, restaurant, or even the retailer side, to better predict consumption and really empower the users to be more efficient with how they're ordering food and how much they're ordering and how much they're processing. Because for the longest time, food waste has just been a part of everyday business. It was just taken for granted. In fact, one big retailer in the U.S., one of their VPs would go around and look at how much produce they were throwing away, and that would tell them how well that store was doing. The more produce they were throwing away, the better the store was doing because there's more turnover, and that's really changing, and it's quite exciting to see.
Absolutely. Data is going to be one of the keys to being more intelligent in regards to what decisions to make from a personal point of view, but also farmers using AI to be able to predict how much pesticides they have to implement in their land. So there is a lot of promise. At the same time, there is still a big green premium to pay for all these better solutions for you. So both of your solutions are still exclusive in somewhat way to a niche of the population. And you also mentioned that there will be differences between geographies, also regarding the adoption of all of these innovations and changes, right? So we need to have that in mind when we bring new products to the market. They need to be culturally accepted in those different markets, and we need to see how to lower the green premium if we aim to really make an impact at scale. So I'd also like to see what's your view on that better food system, because whenever we speak about the fact that we need to change the status quo, we need to create something different. What would that look like in your views, and what do you think are the main areas we should be focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, for me, there are two. One is education, which Moody, you touched upon, right? I mean, it's about educating consumers when buy foods, which foods can be helpful for us, and having all that very available, right? It's all about democratizing. There's a lot of misinformation as well out there. So as long as we keep it also backed by evidence, by research, right, about different studies that can help. But also, right, we spoke about this whole ecosystem, so it's all about educating as well, the retailers, educating, and that's, why the emphasis also on a lot of research, cooperating with specialists and experts and nutritionists and really people that are leading the space. So that's one, for me, key point, education. The other one is personalization, and really believe that we are seeing there's no really one size-fits-all approach to this. There are so many factors involved, right, in healthy eating, and in each of the countries where we live and where we buy. And so we really gotta do something to personalize, and that's why, my team and I are really obsessed about this, like all these, using all the power of this data to really make sure that, each of you have your own data and have like different also benchmarks and studies to show you, okay, what can be done here to help.
Absolutely. Definitely, education is one of the key points we are also focusing on. And in our foundation, we have a methodology with which we work with children to raise awareness around all the implications that our food system has. So education is definitely something to keep in mind. At the same time, when we are educating, we have to convey a message. And what I see is that we have no consensus on what that message should be. So when we think about a healthy diet, there is no consensus. And I read recently the Eat Lancet report. So in 2019, supposedly, the medical community around the world and nutritionists said what a healthy and sustainable diet was supposed to be. And this year they had to reformulate and correct what they had stated some years ago, and they had to put some animal protein back in the equation, in the plate. So that worries me, because before it was super clear that a sustainable and healthy diet was in line. And now with this change, we get some doubts, but especially the fact that there is no consensus.
Well, exactly. The guidelines need to continue to be updated, right? This is like dynamic, it's fluid. There's so much research going on. I mean, when we look just, in terms of food and microbiome impact, 80% of all the research around this has been produced only in the last 4-5 years. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that we gotta really catch up on this. And, the guidelines, nutrition protocols, they gotta adapt to this, as long as obviously there's backing by evidence, and there will always be polarization as well. I mean, there's, again, no one-size-fits-all approach, but, where research is going is really trying to, personalize as well, depending on, multiple factors.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything that's being said, and perhaps to add just a different angle to it for the startups in the room and the innovative people that are looking to come up with solutions themselves in the room, is to just always remember to really find a real problem within the supply chain, and there's many, that need solving, and then come up with an innovative solution to solve it. Because oftentimes, and it's not just this industry, it's all industries across the board, we come up with amazing, innovative solutions and then try to find a problem that it solves. So this is just a reminder, and this was something that really helped us a lot, was that one of the biggest challenges for adopting technologies is the existing supply chains are very, they have very thin margins. They've been around for decades. And so our target customers are very hesitant to adopt new technologies that are going to disrupt their existing supply chain and their existing, their day-to-day work habits. And so one of the things that we wanted to implement in our solution was to really come up with something that can be easily adopted by these customers. So just to remember that, and to always look at the problem first that you really want to solve. And oftentimes that's how some of the best technologies come on the market, is someone has a problem that they're just facing personally, they look for a solution, they can't find it, and then they start coming up with a solution.
I love that, and I guess there are many entrepreneurs in the audience that will for sure adopt that advice. Yeah. So just to summarize, we are coming to an end, unfortunately. We need more education, we need personalization, and we need to tap into a real problem. So thank you very much for staying here with us until now.